A contemporary reading from the great song by Brother David Steindl-Rast. There is really only one song, and it's the great song. It's the cosmic song. It's the song that all things and all animals and all plants and all humans sing in their deepest heart. And every song that a human sings with his or her voice is only an expression of that one great song, which is there from the beginning and will be there after the end. The great song, the great sound comes out of silence, or it isn't the great song. If you listen deeply to the silence within you, then you find that song. St. Francis was the great troubadour of God because he came out of the silence of weeks that he would spend in solitude. Then he sang the love of God, so filling his heart that it had to overflow. He would go and hold one stick as a fiddle and another stick as a fiddle bow, and would just sing to God that great song in his heart overflowing. And if we can learn that, we can make, even with two sticks, the most beautiful music in the world. In one poem, Rainer Maria Rilke speaks about the change that is happening all the time around us. Even though the world changes like cloud formations, all that is fulfilled returns home to the one, the changeless one. Above all the turning and changing, wider and freer remains your song, God with the lyre, God with the harp. Sufferings have not been learned. Loving has not really been learned. And what separates us in death has not been unveiled, but the great song above the earth hollows and celebrates it all. In another poem, Rilke says, I live my life in big circles that surround all things, that circles around all that is. Maybe I will not complete the last circle, but I will attempt it. I circle around God, that ancient tower, and I've been circling for centuries and millennia. And I still don't know, am I a falcon, a storm, or the great song? For wisdom in contemporary expression, we give thanks.
A reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9. They left that district and began a journey through Galilee. But Jesus did not want anyone to know about it. He was teaching the disciples all along these lines. The promised one is going to be delivered into the hands of others and will be put to death. But 3 days later, this one will rise again. Though they failed to understand these words, they were afraid to question him. They returned home to Capernaum. Once they were inside the house, Jesus began to ask them, "What were you discussing on the way home?" At this, they fell silent, for on the way they had been arguing about who among them was the most important. So Jesus sat down and called the 12 over and said, "If any of you wants to be first, you must be the last one of all and at the service of all." Then Jesus brought a little child into their midst, and putting his arm around the child, said to them, "Whoever becomes a child such as this for my sake welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. For the challenge and encouragement of the gospel, we give thanks.
May I speak in the name of God, who creates, redeems, and gives life to the whole of creation. What's the story, Morning Glory? No, this is not the start of a tribute to one of the biggest British music bands of all time. But What's the Story, Morning Glory is indeed not only a lyric and a song, but the title of Oasis' undoubtedly seminal, if somewhat overrated, album of the 1990s. The song, What's the Story, Morning Glory, is itself hardly the star of the album, but it is significant in naming our human temptations to escapism, to the pursuit of transient pleasures, and of the avoidance of the will to live by a deeper meaning. Because what is the story by and into which we seek to live our lives? This is at the heart of the questions posed by our two readings today. For not least in the season of creation, what is it that centres and guides our lives? The Gospel reading has Jesus following up with the disciples in saying again and teaching that suffering is an accompaniment of the way of Jesus, because suffering is a key aspect of authentic divine love. In this story, however, the challenge of love is focused in the placing of a child in the midst of the gathering. For in Jesus' day, children embodied the lowest of the low, the most vulnerable, marginal, and easily discardable. All of which is vital for us to reflect upon as we consider what is marginal to our lives and what is central to our lives and our world, at least in earthly terms. Who and what belongs at the heart of our stories? Who are we not including in our love? Who do we push to the centre, away from the centre, and put ourselves at the centre? Our contemporary reading from Brother David Steindl-Rast, The Great Story, offers us another vital dimension. Indeed, arguably this is one of the most crucial dimensions to a living, healthy story today. For whilst those in the days of Jesus took this as read, as obvious, modern people typically find it quite difficult to associate with the cosmic and the heavenly. Indeed, the developments of modern science seem to have distanced rather than brought human beings closer to the wider cosmos of which we are a part. And so core, therefore, to our human mental, social, as well as planetary health must be a recovery of a true sense of belonging, a deep belonging, not only to our human families and connections, emotionally and practically significant as they may or may not be, but a belonging to all that exists. So how do we renew this core sense of belonging? In a minute or two, I will invite us to share in a meditation as one way in. Firstly, however, let me say something about the healthy theology we also need, for we need intelligent thinking as well as intelligent and sensitive spiritual practice. Because too often religious practice, teaching and spirituality can become an obstacle rather than an aid. And where that is so, it is a major problem for humanity. For let us recall that the Latin derivation of the word religion, it's not about a set of beliefs. It's religio, which is about binding in English. Healthy religion's purpose, therefore, is about enabling belonging, binding us not simply to one another and to God, but to everything that exists. So the heart of the challenge of the season of creation is much more than inviting us to celebrate God in creation and to care and act for the earth. Those things are important, but we're also called to be renewed in our theology and our spirituality and address how those things sometimes separate rather than bind and enable us to belong. Because sadly, Christians are all too often seeking to praise God in creation and act environmentally, but with very outdated notions. One of the contemporary theologians who offers us renewed, dynamic theological vision is the Franciscan Ilia Delio. She names our contemporary conceptual problems and offers us ways out. Because she says we live in a world that is trapped in what she calls a cult of cosmic pessimism. A cult of cosmic pessimism. Cosmic pessimism, she says, is the belief that nature has no purpose and that whatever meaning exists in the world is our own human creation. And this belief is taken for granted by most scientific thinkers and much of the media today. In contrast, Ilia Delio encourages us to share a different approach because she writes, having engaged with modern science, to say that today we have new ideas of an unfinished universe, and theology may therefore point out that the cosmic pessimism, which is usually taken as the epitome of hard-nosed realism, is not as self-evidently justifiable as it seems to many contemporary intellectuals. For when you look at geology, evolutionary biology, and cosmology today, they situate Earth, life, and human existence within the framework of an immense cosmic drama of transformation that is still going on. And all human beings are doing is trying to make sense of this by using some patterns and models to make sense of it, but this story is so much greater than this attempt at human control and rationalism. Ilia Delio is not alone in such thinking. She explicitly draws on earlier prophetic modern Christian thinkers such as Teilhard de Chardin and Thomas Merton, who also invite us to change our lenses of perception and reconceptualize how God and world, science and sacrality live and move together. Because unless we seek to bind Christian faith to ancient categories of thought, as many do, or simply to reject that to which they sought to point as just a sort of reaction, secularization, as Ilia Delio puts it, is not a zero game necessitating the demise of faith. It is an invitation for us to reconceptualize with all sorts of people to discover deeper mystery and purpose in our world. For despite the ideological aggression of the likes of people like Richard Dawkins, this new spirituality does not reject science. What it rejects is scientism, which you see in Richard Dawkins, the elevation of science above all things as a new God. It rejects scientism in which the methodology and data of natural science alone are allowed to contribute to our understanding of the world and the human condition in it. The new spirituality calls on natural science itself as a witness against the inadequacies of a purely secularized worldview. Ilia Delio's call to humanity is therefore a call for us to co-create in an unfinished universe. Like great theologians down the ages, this does not require that we take seriously, this does indeed require that we take seriously the reason and conceptual gifts of our time, letting go of what makes no sense, and listening to what Dawkins and other people say that makes sense. But to use Ilia Delio's words again, the discoveries of modern science especially Big Bang cosmology, universalism or cosmic wholeness as it points to, and evolution, which points us to nature's openness to the future, have ushered in two new dimensions of life: wholeness and futurism. Wholeness and futurism, an invitation to share in the continuing work of God in creation and the call of the Spirit to be more than we are at the moment. So contrary to the ancient ideas that our Christian theology often clings to, the ancient Ptolemaic cosmos of order, stasis and hierarchy, the Big Bang cosmos invites us to participate in the evolving capacity of spirit for greater wholeness and openness to consummation in the future. So theologically, then, we will have problems if we confine God to static categories, but we don't have to jump into cosmic pessimism. The God of the Bible surely shows us, as in the story of Jesus in about relationship, that we are to be deeply engaged in the life of the world, because that is where God is to be found, deeply engaged in the life of the world, in every atom and subatomic particle. As relationship, not as an abstract concept or something beyond our world. As constantly revealing divine mystery in a continuing creation in partnership with human beings and everything that is created. So Ilia Delio and the best of contemporary theology about the cosmos encourage us to understand God as the very heart of the unfolding of our evolving creation. So science and faith are therefore not necessarily opposed, as they can be, but they're partners in tracing respectively both the patterns and the meaning of life, which we need both. Faith does not do well when it tries to do the job of science, but we don't have to live with cosmic pessimism. Rather, as Thomas Merton put it, faith provides us with a mystical dimension which enables us not only to describe our world, which science does to the best of its ability, but to belong to it profoundly, so we do not stay as observers and outsiders in our own life and the life of which we're a part. For Merton said, the Christian's vision of the world ought by its very nature to have in it something of poetic inspiration. Our faith ought to be capable of filling our hearts with a wonder and a vision which sees beyond the surface of things and events, and grasps something of the inner and sacred meaning of the cosmos, which in all its movements and all its aspects sings, like Francis, the praises of its creator and redeemer. Well, that's a lot of theology. I hope some of it's helpful to some of you in our journey of reconceptualizing and moving forward with a living faith that takes seriously science and reason today. But as a way into sharing the great story, let me invite us all to share in a meditative exercise which comes from David Steindl-Rast's Grateful Living website, entitled The Constellation of Your Belonging. Because what is a constellation? A constellation, or a pattern of stars, is of course a wonderful thing and a rich metaphor for thinking about the ways in which we, as individuals and people together, have a shared orbit even when we feel alone. When we first learn, for example, that the stars shine during the day, but we can't see them, surely that's a revelation. You may remember when you figured that out or someone explained it to you. The stars don't actually go away during the day even though we can't see them. It's what some scholars call a kind of threshold understanding, because once you know it, you can't forget it. What if it were possible to understand our own sense of belonging in that threshold kind of way, in a way that we cannot unknow? So this simple practice supports that, or at least plants a seed for us to explore it. It's a practice of naming, revealing, and appreciating the somewhat invisible constellation in which each of us exist, and a practice of remembering ourselves and feeling again ourselves as members of the great cosmic family of all creation. So to get started, I invite you, if you're comfortable with that, and you don't have to close your eyes and to take a few breaths that allow you to arrive to this moment with as much ease as possible in your body and in your heart. Now I invite you to bring to mind a constellation, a pattern of stars. Constellation can take many, many shapes, of course, but for the purposes of this practice, imagine one that's a spiral. And imagine yourself at the center of that spiral. And around you are concentric circles of light. And as you visualize this, start at the outermost ring of the constellation and allow yourself to look back at your life and the lives that came before you, and name some of the people who have paved the way for your being alive today. They might be familial ancestors or historical figures, writers, activists, leaders, whoever has made your existence a possibility. And as you bring them to mind, take a moment to give thanks for the sacrifices, choices, and the love they made in order for you to exist. Now, following your spiral inward in your mind's eye, bring to mind some of the people whose work in the world allows us simply to be kept alive and connected. The people who grow our food, who transport it to us, who sell it, those who develop medicine, those who build roads, those who provide services to us. And as you think of them, offer your appreciation. And as you continue following the spiral towards the center, name some of the friends, family, or colleagues to whom your life is now linked. Include those who may be very close to you, as well as some who've been so at a different time in your life. Don't try to name everyone, but just note whoever arises and simply offer your thanks. And after naming these human connections, try bringing to mind a specific way in which you are connected to and supported by all of life. Think of aspects of the earth, the trees, the water and air, even the faithful moon, and add these to your constellation. And I invite you to pause and take this in for a moment. Take stock of the constellation of which you are a part. Where are the places that the constellation is shimmering? Where are there places where there are gaps? And now, as the last part of this meditation, return to the image of the constellation with you at the very center. And if your eyes are open or been open, you might close them and reimagine those shimmering stars that encircle you. For you are at the centre of this spiral constellation, this network of support and interconnectedness. Let us consider this, that we live and breathe within such light. We exist in such networks of interconnection, and even on our loneliest days, this constellation is alive and shimmering, as present as the stars in the daytime sky. For that we belong is a fact. And now slowly come back to this time and place. What's the story then in which we know ourselves to belong? Let us give ourselves times like this one we've just shared to allow ourselves to enter into it and live it. And maybe then, to borrow another Oasis song title, it will truly become the wonder wall of our lives. In the name of Jesus, the embodiment of wisdom, the way of suffering love, and the wonder wall of all creation. Amen.